In this episode, I'm going to introduce you to an amazing skill for your Codex or Claude LLMs that allows you to take a given feature and properly set it up to be implemented by a large language model or coding agent. It's actually a real game changer for how you go about code development because it ensures that every time you build something new, it actually works when it gets to production. Well, let's get into it today. So in the previous episode on this channel, I talked a lot about my skill that I called the clarify before build. The purpose of that particular skill was to go through and take your vague requirements and turn them into something that was far more concrete. Created a ledger of all of the answers that you gave it, a shared contract, saved it, and away you could go to the next step. What this particular skill that I'm talking about today does is take that ledger and turn it into a concrete set of production-ready requirements that can be used to build for your LLM. Let me give you an example of what that means. Imagine you decide that you want to have a particular feature that uploads 4 GB videos for YouTube. Now, that's a really clear requirement, and as you went through the first skill that I covered in the previous episode, you'd absolutely get to that shared understanding. However, if you were to pass that straight off to your coding agent, there's a very good chance that it would develop a small test that tested if it could download and upload a 4.5 megabyte file and would pass that as yes, functionally, this can upload stuff to YouTube. The problem would be that when you went to run it in production, boom, it suddenly doesn't work with your 2 to 4 gigabyte file. That's a massive problem, and it's something that large language models do all the time. They take the easiest possible path to get to a solution unless you're very explicit about what you're trying to do. This particular skill addresses that problem by forcing a large language model to continually iterate over those requirements until it reaches again a shared understanding of what they mean. However, unlike last time where it would constantly interrogate you for those answers, this one will actually go through and just make sure that it meets the definition that you got in your previous skill. I call this particular skill the feature design pre-flight, and its purpose is to take a given set of requirements and map them all the way through your application until it has fully figured out every single aspect of how it should work. The other really cool thing about using this is that when you create a new feature and add it to an existing code base, it will actually trace out all of the other impacts that it might have on something else that you're doing. So for instance, if you introduce a new auth database, it will figure out all of the different routes on your particular web app that require that auth database in order to work, and will make sure that when you actually release it, it works properly. This particular skill is actually the foundation of what I have come to believe is the truly most effective way to go about doing vibe coding, and that is to take the concept of test-driven development and apply it to literally everything that you do. In effect, you force your large language model to spend a lot of time upfront developing all of the tests, positive and negative, that you need in order to ensure that your app is working. Over time, as you keep using this skill, as it keeps getting implemented, as you keep building features, you will find that you have a very, very robust set of tests and the ways to check that your app is working so that you very rarely release something into production that doesn't work as intended the first time. Not the 10th time when your AI has gone back and forth and now you've got thousands of lines of code that you have no idea what they do. This is actually a very powerful skill, and when you combine it with the previous skill, creates a very, very powerful way to direct your large language models to build what they need to build well and to do it right from the start. These two things alone will fundamentally change the quality and improve your ability to deliver code on time, really, really well done every single time. Like, these two skills are an absolute game changer, and we use them all the time at Catalyst Group Solutions. So how does it work? I wrote down this here so that I could refer to it and make sure that I fully explained it to you. So I'm going to work through it now. The first thing it does is that it ingests a list of requirements that come from your feature design brief that you gave it. So that's your clarify before build, or if you have an equivalent skill, it ingests all of those. Next, it starts to translate those into concrete sets of requirements, and very importantly, it relates all of them to a specific number or defined outcome. For instance, if you say you need to upload a 4 GB file, it will directly use that 4 GB as a number. It won't allow any of its requirements to have something that's less than that. And there are times where it may infer that in terms of projecting what it means, but it will clarify those with you. Then it starts to trace all of those impacts all the way through. So for things like an auth database, it then looks at all of the different routes that may require that auth database in order to work. That can go for any particular feature that you want to introduce. It maps how it works and how it's going to impact your code and figures out what needs to change before it goes ahead and does the change. Now, I do want to be clear right here. Obviously, just like when humans are developing, there will be times where it doesn't trace everything properly, and that's okay. What you will find is that as you use this skill more and more, the times where that occurs just get less and less, where it doesn't map everything all the way through. And because it's building up a complete test set every single time, the amount of time it takes you to identify those problems and fix them is radically reduced as well. So ultimately, you still end up with a better quality code base. The next thing that it does after mapping all of those requirements all the way through is it develops a set of tests that will allow it to prove that those things work. So for instance, if you develop a UI feature, it will have some sort of end-to-end test that allows it to confirm that that thing works. Importantly, it won't write a single line of code until it's got all of those tests mapped out as pseudocode, and then it goes ahead and implements them. After that, it creates an engineering artifact in the form of an implementation note, and it will share that note with you. It may ask for some feedback, it may ask some clarifying questions if there's still some things that it wants to check with you, but in general, it will make sure that all of those things are mapped out for you. And finally, it repeats that process until every single aspect of what you're designing is done for you. So it just goes through those 6 steps for you, right? Ingests your requirements, translates them into a set of like numerical values or auditable requirements, maps those requirements all the way through, develops tests to meet those requirements, creates an implementation note, and repeats until it is all the way done. There's a few other aspects to this that make it particularly powerful, and it's the sorts of things that you can only get after using this skill for a period of time, and you'll just be able to go to my GitHub and download it for free, which is a huge advantage to you. The first thing it makes sure is that every test can only have one of 3 states: ready, which means it's passed; conditional, which means that it may need to get some clarification from you; or it has blocked, which means it's not done. Now, creating these 3 states as the only 3 states that can be provided is actually really important, because it stops your large language model from kind of bluffing its way through a particular thing. When it knows it can only have one of 3 requirements, it must declare them. And the failure state is always going to be blocked, i.e. you cannot get to ready unless it is positively confirmed as fully ready. The second thing that it does is that every single test is associated with an auditable requirement. For instance, if you have a 4 GB upload, then that must be auditable, i.e. there must be a clear way to trace from this test proves this thing, and that is a requirement that it needs to meet. Again, what this does is it forces the large language model to solve for the problem, not try to infer or bluff its way past it. Number 3, it never trusts its own memory. So for instance, if you're using an SDK of some kind, if you're using some sort of API reference, it will always use those API documents as the source of truth. It won't make up its own, and it won't hallucinate to try and pretend like it solved something that it hasn't. Again, a really important thing to force large language models to do. The next thing is that all of these things are always saved, which means that it feeds into your agent's continuous learning loop. What you will find as you use this over time, particularly when you include my continuous learning loop, which I'll do on a different episode, is it will never make the same mistake twice. It may make a mistake once and there'll be an issue and it will identify it, and then it will save that, and 24 hours later when your continuous learning loop runs and updates all of your skills, you will find that it never makes that mistake again. And finally, and I think really powerfully, you will see in the skill if you go to my GitHub, which is publicly hosted, I've created some domains of knowledge which are constantly being updated and added to. In these particular domains of knowledge, common issues that are constantly reoccurring as you design stuff are all recorded, and it will be able to use those things to add stuff to it. For instance, you can see on the screen that I've got a table there of all of the different things you need to consider for each of those domains. That particular knowledge domain is covered by my continuous learning loop, and it's constantly being updated, which means that as common issues continue to occur, I save them so that the next time I come across them, I don't have to save and solve for those problems again. It's just continuing. It's just covered in the way that I approach it. Now, hopefully you can already see with these two skills how that radically changes the power and ability of your large language model to create stuff for you. And hopefully you like it so much that you're choosing to like and subscribe and click the notification button for my channel. That would be really awesome. However, that's actually really just the start. All this does is make sure that your large language model is set up to be more successful. And in the next few skills, I'm going to start sharing with you the different ways that you can use to optimize your token burn and to make your entire process more efficient. My name's James. I hope you're enjoying this channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification button, and I'll see you on the next episode.